The guardian grotesque. The stone was screaming. Elara didn't realize it at first. She'd been restoring grotesques and gargoyles for 20 years, had cleaned hundreds of medieval faces frozen in eternal agony, and none of them had ever bothered her like this. But this one, hidden high on the north face of Notre Dame des Ombres, was different. This one made her hands shake. She leaned closer on the scaffold, the wind whipping her dark hair across her face as she worked. The city of Beaumont spread out 4 stories below, all slate roofs and winding cobblestone streets, but she barely noticed. All her attention was focused on the face emerging from beneath centuries of grime and pollution. It wasn't a monster. That was the first thing that struck her as wrong. Every other grotesque on this cathedral was a demon, a beast, a nightmare creature meant to ward off evil. Twisted faces with fangs and horns, serpents wrapped around tortured souls. The usual medieval horror show designed to keep the faithful fearful and the sinners repentant. But this face was human, perfectly, impossibly human. A man's face rendered in such exquisite detail that Elara could see individual eyelashes carved into the stone, could trace the lines of tendons in his neck stretched taut with strain, could count the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, crinkled not with laughter but with absolute soul-deep terror. His mouth was open, screaming. She'd seen screaming faces before in stone, but nothing like this. This wasn't stylized medieval drama. This was real. This was someone who had known what it meant to experience true horror, and some brilliant, disturbed artist had captured that exact moment and frozen it in limestone. Her brush moved across his forehead, clearing away a particularly thick layer of black crust. The deposit crumbled under her careful strokes, falling away in chunks, and then she saw it. The right eye fully revealed for the first time in who knew how many centuries. Elara actually gasped. The eye was extraordinary. The pupil had been carved with such precision that it seemed to have real depth, as if she could fall into it. The iris showed tiny radiating lines, each one delicately chiseled by a master's hand. There were even small imperfections in the white of the eye, little veins and variations in texture that made it look wet, alive, real. And it was looking directly at her. She jerked back instinctively, her heart slamming against her ribs. The scaffold swayed dangerously and she grabbed the rail, her breath coming fast. Rational thought kicked in after a moment. It was just the angle, just the way the light was hitting it. Just her imagination working overtime because she'd been up here alone for too long. But when she forced herself to look again, the eye still seemed to track her, seemed to plead with her, seemed to be trying desperately to communicate something. Elara packed her tools with hands that wouldn't quite steady. It was late afternoon anyway, the sun starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the old city in shades of gold and amber. Time to call it a day. She'd been working on the cathedral's restoration for 3 weeks now, methodically cleaning each grotesque, documenting everything, taking hundreds of photographs. Tomorrow she'd finish this one, reveal the whole face, see what other details were hidden beneath the grime. She descended the scaffold carefully, her legs shaky. When she reached the ground and looked back up, the face seemed impossibly far away, just another dark shape on the cathedral's facade. But that single cleaned eye gleamed in the dying light, catching the sun like a mirror, like a signal, like a warning. That night in her small hotel room 3 blocks from the cathedral, Elara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the face, about the level of skill required to create something so lifelike. Who had carved it? When? Why hide such a masterpiece among the monsters? She pulled out her laptop and searched through the cathedral's historical records, but there was nothing. No mention of an unusual grotesque. No artist's name. No date. Just a gap in the documentation, like someone had deliberately erased that part of the building's history. When she finally fell asleep after midnight, she dreamed of falling. Not the usual confused dream falling where you wake with a jerk. This was vivid, real, terrifying. She could feel the wind tearing at her clothes, could see the cobblestones rushing up to meet her, could hear her own voice screaming, screaming, screaming. She saw hands reaching for her missing, saw faces turned upward in horror, saw the ground coming closer, closer, the impact inevitable, unavoidable, and then she woke tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, her throat raw as if she really had been screaming. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought she might be having a heart attack. She stumbled to the bathroom and threw up, then sat on the cold tile floor until dawn, too afraid to go back to sleep. When she returned to the cathedral the next morning, moving like a zombie on 3 hours of broken sleep, she almost turned around. Almost called the diocese and told them she was done, they needed to find another restorer. But Elara had never left a job unfinished in her life, and she wasn't about to start now. Besides, she needed to see the face complete, needed to understand what she was looking at. She climbed the scaffold and got to work. Her documentation was meticulous as always. Photograph the current state, test a small area with solvent, photograph again, proceed inch by inch, removing layer after layer of pollution and biological growth. The work was meditative usually. Today her hands wouldn't stop shaking. By noon, the face was fully revealed. The effect was stunning and deeply, profoundly wrong. Unlike every other grotesque on the cathedral, this one showed no weathering at all. The features were as crisp and sharp as if they'd been carved yesterday. No erosion from rain and wind. No pitting from acid rain. No damage from freeze-thaw cycles. It was as if the stone itself had been protected, preserved, kept in perfect condition by some unnatural force. And the expression, God, the expression. Elara had to keep looking away because it was too intense, too real. The man's eyes were wide, showing white all around the irises. His mouth was stretched in a scream that seemed to echo even in silence. Every muscle in his face was tensed in terror, tendons standing out on his neck like cables. Whoever he was, whatever had happened to him, he had died or been captured or been transformed in a moment of absolute horror. She noticed something else. Along the jawline, barely visible even now that the stone was clean, were tiny inscriptions in Latin. Her Latin was rusty, learned in university and rarely used, but she could make out a few words. Ward, binding, eternal, vigilance, imprisonment, seal. What kind of grotesque had inscriptions? What did they mean? Elara took dozens of photographs of the text, then climbed down and headed straight for the cathedral's archives. The archives were in the basement, a labyrinth of underground rooms that smelled of old paper and slow decay. The archivist was Father Clement, a man so old and dried out he looked like he'd been mummified and forgotten down here decades ago. His office was a cave of filing cabinets and overflowing boxes, lit by a single dim lamp that barely pushed back the shadows. When Elara explained what she'd found, describing the unusual grotesque and the Latin inscriptions, Father Clement's reaction was immediate and alarming. His face, already pale, went absolutely white. His hands started to tremble. He set down the pen he'd been holding and stared at her with an expression that mixed fear and something else. Resignation, maybe, or dread. The grotesques on the north face, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. You've been cleaning them. The unusual one with the human face. You've fully revealed it. Yes, Elara said, that's my job. That's what I was hired to do. Is there a problem? Father Clement was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words were careful, measured. Some things are better left as they are, Mademoiselle Elara. The stones of this cathedral hold many secrets. Not all of them are meant to be disturbed. Some things were hidden for a reason. Some things were locked away because they needed to be kept locked away. What are you talking about? Elara asked. It's just a grotesque. An unusual one, yes, but just stone and craftsmanship. What secrets could it possibly hold? The priest stood slowly, his joints creaking like old wood. He moved to one of the filing cabinets and pulled out a drawer, then seemed to think better of it and pushed it closed again. When he turned back to her, his eyes were wet. You were hired by the new administration at the diocese, he said. Young men, modern men, they don't believe in the old stories. They see only a magnificent cathedral in need of care and maintenance. They ignored my warnings. They brought you here, and perhaps that was God's will. Perhaps the time has come. But mademoiselle, I beg you, if you value your soul, if you value your sanity, do not clean that grotesque any further. Do not touch it again. Leave it as it is. Leave him as he is. Leave who? Elara demanded. Who is it? What happened? Father Clement shook his head. I've said too much already. Please, just stop your work on that section of the facade. There are dozens of other grotesques. Work on those. Forget about the man's face. Forget you ever saw it. He turned away, disappearing into the maze of shelves and boxes. Elara waited for 20 minutes, but he didn't come back. Finally, frustrated and more disturbed than she wanted to admit, she left the archives and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun. But the warmth couldn't chase away the chill that had settled into her bones. That night the dreams came back, but worse, much worse. She wasn't just falling anymore. She was seeing through someone else's eyes, living someone else's memory. She stood in a stone chamber lit by flickering torches, her hands bound with rough rope that cut into her wrists. Men in dark robes surrounded her, their faces hidden by deep hoods. They were chanting something in Latin, the words rolling over her like waves of condemnation. One of them stepped forward, and she understood even though the language was archaic medieval French. Heretic, blasphemer, questioner of God's word. The punishment for such sins was fire. She would burn at dawn in the town square, burn until her flesh melted from her bones, burn until her screams could no longer escape her ruined throat. Burn until she was nothing but ash and cautionary tale. Terror flooded through her, so intense she could taste it, metallic and sharp like blood. Her legs gave out and she would have fallen if the guards hadn't caught her. She tried to speak, to beg, to explain that she'd only asked questions, only sought to understand, only wanted to learn, but her throat was too tight. No sound came out except a thin whine of absolute fear. Then another man appeared, different from the robed figures. He wore a leather apron covered in white stone dust. His hands were rough and scarred from years of working with chisel and hammer. A craftsman, a builder, the cathedral's master mason. He leaned close and whispered words that somehow she understood perfectly. There is another way, he said. The church needs you. Not your death, but your service, your eternal service. The old seal weakens. It needs reinforcement. It needs a ward. A living soul bound into stone, powering the binding with its unending fear and torment. You will not die, but you will not live. Not for a year, not for a century, not for all the ages of man until the world itself ends. The ward must hold. The prison must remain sealed, and you will be the lock. In the dream, in the memory, she nodded frantically. Yes, anything but the fire, anything but burning alive. She would take any other fate, accept any other horror, just not that, not the flames. The mason's face was sad. You will regret this choice, he said. You will beg for death. You will pray for the mercy of flames. But it will be too late. The binding cannot be broken. The ward cannot be released. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Then the ritual began. She was taken to a different chamber, this one filled with tools and half-carved blocks of limestone. They laid her on a stone table, and the chanting grew louder, faster, more intense. The mason began to work, his chisel moving with impossible precision, carving symbols into the air itself. And the stone, God help her, the stone began to move. Began to flow like water, like mercury, reaching for her with tendrils that gleamed in the torchlight. She tried to scream then, tried to take it back, tried to say she'd changed her mind, she'd take the fire after all. But it was too late. The stone touched her skin and began to spread. Cold, so impossibly cold, flowing up her arms, across her chest, over her face. She could feel it entering her nose, her mouth, her eyes, flowing down her throat. Could feel her consciousness being pulled apart, dissolved, scattered through the molecular structure of the limestone itself. And the worst part, the truly unbearable part, was that she didn't die. She didn't lose consciousness. She remained aware as her body was transformed, as her flesh became stone, as her scream was frozen mid-breath and locked in place. Frozen forever. The terror crystallized, became eternal, became the power source for whatever seal they were creating. Her fear would feed it. Her agony would maintain it. Century after century after century. The last thing she saw before her eyes became stone was the mason's face, twisted with guilt and sorrow. The last thing she heard was his whisper. His name was Mathis. His name was Mathis Beaumont. Elara woke up screaming, her voice echoing off the walls of her hotel room. It was 4 a.m. She was shaking so violently her teeth chattered. The dream, the memory, whatever it was, had been so vivid, so real. She could still feel the phantom sensation of stone flowing over her skin, could still taste the limestone dust in her mouth. She ran to the bathroom and threw up again, heaving until there was nothing left. Then she sat on the floor and cried, great racking sobs that hurt her chest. Because she knew, somehow she knew with absolute certainty that what she'd seen was real, that it had actually happened, that the man's face on the cathedral wasn't just a carving, it was a prison. It was Mathis Beaumont, scholar and heretic, who had chosen eternal torment over an hour of flames and had been screaming in silent agony for over 400 years. She should have run, should have packed her bags right then and gotten on the first train out of Beaumont. Should have never looked back, but she didn't, she couldn't, because now she understood what Father Clement had been trying to tell her. By cleaning the grotesque, by removing the grime and pollution and biological growth, she'd been healing the stone. And if the stone was the prison, if Mathis himself was bound into its structure, then healing it meant weakening whatever he was supposed to be containing. When dawn finally came, gray and cold, Elara dragged herself back to the cathedral. She looked terrible, she knew. Hadn't slept in days, had barely eaten. Her hands shook constantly now, and there were dark circles under her eyes. But she had to see him, had to confirm what she now knew in her bones. She climbed the scaffold slowly, every movement an effort. When she reached the top and came face to face with the grotesque, with Mathis, she put her hand flat against the cold stone of his cheek. The moment her skin made contact, electricity jolted through her. Not painful, but shocking, a live current that made every nerve ending fire at once. And she heard him, heard his voice, thin and desperate and raw with centuries of suffering. "Please," he whispered, "please stop. You're killing me." "No, not killing. I wish you were killing me. You're waking me, you're breaking the seal, you're making it worse. The silence is rising. Can't you feel it? Can't you sense it? The thing below is waking up and it's hungry and it's been so long since it fed, and you're going to let it out. Please, please, just stop. Let me sleep. Let me fade. Let the grime cover me again. Let me be forgot." Elara snatched her hand back, stumbling on the scaffold. She would have fallen if she hadn't caught the railing. Her heart was racing, her breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't possible. Stone couldn't talk. The dead couldn't speak. She was losing her mind, that was all. Stress and lack of sleep and too much time alone on this project. She needed to take a break, see a doctor, maybe get some medication. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. She'd heard him, Mathis Beaumont, the ward, and he was terrified, not of being trapped. He'd been trapped for 4 centuries. He was terrified of what she was doing, of what her restoration work was unleashing. She climbed down and went looking for Father Clement again. Found him in a side chapel she'd never noticed before, kneeling before an altar that was older than the rest of the cathedral. The stone was different here, darker, rougher, more primitive. Above the altar hung a wooden plaque with words carved in archaic French. She could just barely make them out. Here lies the prison of the Leviathan of Silence. May the ward hold eternal. You know, Elara said flatly, you've always known what he is, what he's doing. Father Clement didn't turn around. His voice when he spoke was tired, defeated. His name was Mathis Beaumont, born 1556. Died or perhaps didn't die in 1583. He was a scholar, a brilliant one. Studied at the university in Paris. But he had the misfortune of being brilliant during the wrong time, of asking the wrong questions, of pointing out contradictions in church doctrine that the Inquisition couldn't ignore. Elara moved to stand beside him, looking up at the plaque, and they gave him a choice: burn or become a ward. Father Clement nodded slowly. Beneath this cathedral lies a crypt that predates Christianity. The Romans built it, sealed something inside, something they found in the old mines beneath the city. The records are fragmentary, but they called it the Leviathan of Silence. An entity, a force, a presence that consumes, not flesh or blood, but something more fundamental. It feeds on sound, on light, on warmth, on everything that makes a space feel alive. It creates zones of absolute silence, perfect darkness, complete stillness, death without death, emptiness without end. That's impossible, Elara said, but her voice lacked conviction. The Romans thought so too, until it killed 3 cohorts. They sealed it with their best engineering and their strongest magic. When the cathedral was built centuries later, the monks discovered that seal, incorporated it into the foundation. But seals weaken over time. Cracks form, and if that thing got loose, if it reached the surface, it would spread. Slowly at first, then faster, zones of silence expanding like a plague. The world going quiet, going dark, going still. So they made Mathis into a battery, Elara said bitterly, used his suffering to power the seal. The priest finally turned to look at her. His face was ancient, lined with guilt that went back generations. A ward requires 3 things: stone with natural binding properties, a vessel willing, however reluctantly, to sacrifice itself, and a source of perpetual spiritual energy. Fear is the strongest emotion. Terror that never ends, never fades, just cycles forever through the same moment of absolute horror. Mathis's fear powers the seal. His stone body is the lock. As long as he screams, as long as he suffers, the Leviathan stays imprisoned. And I've been weakening him, Elara whispered. Every layer of grime I remove, every crack I repair, I'm healing the stone, teaching it to forget pain. Yes. Then what do I do? How do I fix this? How do I stop what I've started? Father Clement's eyes were full of terrible knowledge. The only way to reinforce a ward is to renew the sacrifice. The binding requires fresh pain, fresh terror, fresh spiritual energy. Someone must take Mathis's place. Someone must choose, as he once chose, to become the new ward, to scream for the next 400 years while Mathis's soul is finally allowed to rest. Elara backed away from him, horror and revulsion rising in her throat. You're insane. You can't be suggesting that anyone would. No, absolutely not. I'm calling the police. The diocese, someone. This is madness. This is evil. Call whoever you like, the priest said sadly, but it won't matter. You've formed a connection with Mathis through your work. You've touched his stone, absorbed his memories, felt his fear. To the entity below, to the Leviathan, you're already marked, already interesting. already a potential vessel if the ward fails completely. Run if you want, but it will follow. Silence will follow. You'll wake up in other cities and find zones of perfect quiet surrounding you. You'll watch people stop speaking mid-sentence, their voices simply gone. You'll see light fade from rooms that should be bright. And you'll know it's coming for you, feeding on your fear until you're ready to be harvested. That night, Elara sat in the train station with a ticket to Paris clutched in her shaking hand. She'd packed everything, paid her hotel bill, written her resignation email to the diocese. She was done. Finished. Whatever happened to Mathis Beaumont, whatever happened to the cathedral, whatever happened to the world, it wasn't her responsibility. She was just a restorer, just someone who cleaned old stone. None of this was her fault. But she couldn't get on the train, couldn't make herself stand up, walk through the gate, board the car, leave. Because in the silence of her own mind, she could hear Mathis whispering, not begging anymore, just talking, telling her his story in his own words. I was 27, he said. I'd written 3 books, been invited to lecture at universities across Europe. I thought I was going to change the world, help people see beyond superstition and fear. Instead, I got too confident, too public. I gave a lecture in Paris questioning whether biblical miracles could be explained through natural philosophy. The Inquisition was in the audience. 3 days later, they came for me. Elara closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry it happened to you. But I can't be you. I can't take your place. I'm not that brave. I'm not that good. I'm not brave either, Mathis said. I was a coward. I chose this because I was terrified of pain, of burning. If I'd been strong, I would have accepted the flames and died clean. Instead, I'm trapped in a nightmare that never ends. But here's what I've learned in 400 years. The binding doesn't just hold the Leviathan. It holds back something worse. If that thing gets free, if it reaches the surface and starts to spread, millions will die. Not die, become like me. Caught between life and death, frozen in the moment of their last terror, feeding the silence as it grows and grows until the whole world is consumed. That can't be real, Elara said. That's too big, too terrible. The world doesn't work that way. Doesn't it? Mathis asked. Have you been paying attention? Have you noticed the cold spots in the cathedral? The zones where sound seems muffled? The way shadows are getting deeper, darker, staying longer? The seal has been weakening for years. I've felt it cracking, felt the pressure building. Your restoration work accelerated it, yes, but it would have failed eventually anyway. I'm old. I'm tired. I'm eroding from the inside out. The ward can't hold much longer. Then what do we do? Elara demanded. There has to be another way, some other solution. I'll stop working. I'll tell them to cover you in concrete, seal you away forever. There is one other option, Mathis said quietly. I found it, remembered it, pulled it from the deepest parts of the stone where the original ritual was recorded. The binding can be renewed without a new vessel. I can be reinforced, but it requires 2 things. First, I have to choose it again, have to willingly accept the horror, embrace the pain, commit myself again to eternal suffering. And second, someone has to help me do it. Has to deliberately damage the stone, scar it, wound it, cause it new pain so that I can feed on that pain and convert it to power. Elara's hands clenched on the train ticket, crumpling it. You're asking me to torture you. I'm asking you to save me, Mathis said, and save yourself, and save everyone. I can't do it alone. The ritual requires an outside actor, someone to inflict the wounds while I choose to accept them. Someone to be my priest and my executioner, and you're the only one who can hear me, the only one who knows the truth, the only one who can help. Why would you choose more suffering? Elara asked, her voice breaking. Why not just let it end? Let the seal break, let the Leviathan out, let it all be finished. Because I've seen what it does, Mathis whispered. The night they bound me, before the stone took me completely, the Leviathan sensed what was happening. It reached up through the cracks, just a tendril of its presence, and touched my mind. It showed me what would happen if it got free. I saw cities gone silent, saw people frozen mid-step, their voices gone, their warmth gone, their light gone. Saw children unable to cry, mothers unable to scream, lovers unable to speak. Just silence spreading like cancer until the whole world was nothing but a museum of the almost dead. And in that silence, it fed, grew stronger, until it could reach beyond Earth into the stars, consuming solar systems, galaxies, spreading through the universe like a plague of nothing. That sounds like a nightmare, Elara said, like the hallucination of a tortured mind. Maybe it is, Mathis agreed, but do you want to risk it? Do you want to gamble that I'm wrong, that it's just madness born from centuries of suffering? Or do you want to be sure? Do you want to know that you did everything possible to prevent it? Elara sat in that train station until her train departed without her. Then she sat through 3 more trains, watching them leave, watching her chances of escape disappear one by one. When the station closed for the night, she walked back to her hotel through empty streets, and the city felt different now. Quieter, the sounds of traffic muffled, the voices from open windows strangely distant. The silence was already spreading. The next morning, she went to a hardware store and bought supplies: heavy-duty acid, diamond-tipped chisels, abrasive compounds, tools meant for destroying stone, not preserving it. The clerk asked what project she was working on. She said she was removing graffiti from a monument. He wished her luck. When she climbed the scaffold that day, Mathis was waiting. She could feel his presence now without even touching the stone, could sense his fear and his determination mixed together in equal measure. "Are you sure?" she asked him. "There's still time to find another way." "There is no other way," Mathis said, "and yes, I'm sure. I've had 400 years to think about this. To understand what I am, what I chose, what I have to keep choosing. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a guardian. This is my purpose, my calling. I just needed help to fulfill it." "If I do this," Elara said, "will you be able to hold? Will the seal be strong enough? How long will it last?" "Another 400 years, maybe more. Long enough for someone else to find a permanent solution. Long enough for the world to develop new seals, new bindings, new ways of containing the things that should never be freed. Long enough." "And what about me?" Elara asked. "What happens to me after?" Mathis was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. The ritual creates a bond between the ward and the reinforcer. You'll carry part of me with you always. You might see through my eyes sometimes, might feel echoes of what I feel, might have nightmares for the rest of your life, but you'll be free. You'll be alive. You'll be able to walk away. That's more than I'll ever have." Elara pulled out the acid. Her hands were steady now. She'd made her choice. "I need you to know something," she said. "I'm going to make sure people remember you. I've written it all down. Your name, your story, what you sacrificed. I'm going to give it to a historian I trust. Someday people will know what you did. You won't be forgotten." "Thank you," Mathis whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." She began to work. Not with the careful, gentle techniques of restoration, but with deliberate violence. She dripped acid along the lines of his face, watching the stone bubble and scar. She used the diamond chisel to carve fresh lines of anguish, deepening the scream, making the terror more explicit, more powerful. And as she worked, she felt Mathis choose it. Felt him open himself to the pain, accept it, transform it into spiritual energy that flowed down through the stone, down through the walls, down into the foundation where the ancient seal glowed brighter and brighter. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in seconds. Elara's breath came out in clouds. Frost formed on the scaffold, and she felt it, the Leviathan's attention turning toward her. A presence so vast and empty it made her mind reel. It was curious about this human who was strengthening its prison. It reached up with tendrils of perfect silence wrapping around her, tasting her fear. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world went absolutely quiet. No wind, no traffic, no heartbeat in her own chest, just nothing, emptiness, the void. Then the seal flared one last time, blindingly bright in her mind's eye, and the presence receded, pushed back, locked away once more behind walls of power and pain and Mathis Beaumont's eternal scream. Elara collapsed on the scaffold, sobbing. She'd been working for hours without realizing it. The sun was setting. Her hands were covered in acid burns. The grotesque's face was scarred now, deliberately damaged in ways that would confuse and disturb future restorers. But it was powerful. The expression of terror was so profound that anyone who looked at it would feel an echo of Mathis's sacrifice, would sense, without understanding, that something important was being guarded here. "It's done," Mathis said, his voice fainter now, receding back into the stone. Thank you, now go, live your life, remember me. And if you hear of other places, other monuments with strange stories, other wards failing, maybe you can help them too. Maybe you're meant to be a keeper of these secrets, a guardian of the guardians." Elara climbed down and packed her tools for the last time. She looked terrible, she knew, traumatized, aged, changed, but she was alive. She was free, and she'd helped save the world from something that might have been apocalyptic or might have been the delusion of a tortured mind. She would never know for sure, and maybe that was okay. Father Clement found her at the cathedral's entrance. His eyes widened when he saw her face, saw the burns on her hands, saw the new scars on the grotesque high above. "It's done," she said simply. "The ward is reinforced. Mathis chose it, accepted it. The seal will hold." The priest's eyes filled with tears. "God forgive us. God forgive us all for what we ask of the innocent." Mathis Beaumont wasn't innocent, Elara said. He was a questioner, a seeker, a scholar who wouldn't accept easy answers, and he became a guardian, a hero. Make sure that's remembered. Make sure his sacrifice means something. She walked away then, leaving the cathedral and the city of Beaumont behind. But she didn't go home. She couldn't, because 3 days later she received an email from a monastery in the Swiss Alps. They had a statue, they said, very old, very troubling. It wept real tears even though it was solid marble. The tears burned through stone, left scorch marks on the floor, and lately the monks had been having nightmares, dreams of drowning in fire. Dreams of something sealed away beneath the mountains, growing restless, testing its bonds. They needed a specialist, the email said. Someone experienced with unusual cases. Someone discreet. Someone who understood that some restorations weren't about preserving beauty but about maintaining prisons. Elara stared at the email for a long time. Then she looked at herself in the mirror. There were new lines around her eyes, gray streaks in her hair that hadn't been there a week ago. And for just a moment, her reflection changed, shifted. She saw herself carved in stone, mouth open in a scream, frozen forever in the moment of accepting an unbearable burden. Then her normal reflection returned, tired, haunted, knowing. She began to pack. There was work to do, wards to maintain, guardians to help, secrets to keep. She'd been conscripted into a war she'd never known existed, fighting enemies most people would never believe in. But someone had to do it. Someone had to be the keeper of these terrible truths, the guardian of the guardians, and somehow, impossibly, that someone was now her. She just hoped she'd be strong enough, brave enough, And that when her time came, when she finally had to make Mathis's choice, she'd have the courage to choose as he had, to scream forever so that others could keep singing. The train to Switzerland left at dawn. Elara bought a one-way ticket, and as the city disappeared behind her, she touched her own face one last time, feeling the ghost of stone beneath her skin, hearing the echo of Mathis's eternal vigil in the silence of her own mind. The watch was never-ending. The price was terrible, but the alternative was worse, so much worse. And now she understood. Now she knew. Now she carried the weight that guardians had carried for millennia, the knowledge that some horrors were real, some prisons necessary, some sacrifices eternal, and the only thing standing between the world and the silence was people like Mathis Beaumont screaming forever in the walls, people like her helping them hold, helping them endure, helping them remember why they'd chosen this fate. The train picked up speed. The mountains rose ahead. Somewhere in those peaks, another ward was failing. Another guardian needed help, and Elara was coming, scarred but steady, traumatized but determined, human but changed. A keeper of the silence, a guardian of the guardians, a restorer of the prisons that must never break forever.